I ask you about love, probably quote me a sonnet. But you've never looked at a woman and been totally vulnerable. You can't tell me what it feels like to wake up next to a woman and feel truly happy.
Hello everyone. Are the levels okay? Can you hear me all right? Okay, cool. All right, so sorry some of you are sick, and yeah, I'm sick too. My partner's sick. I'm sorry your families are sick. I really hope everyone's okay. Like a lot of shit going on right now. So you know, if you need to talk about it, or you have an opinion on something, or you know, want like extra help or what have you, just let me know. Don't forget that this class is broken up into 2 parts. So we have the first part is the new material on Twitch, and then the second part is all the kind of like general stuff regarding the course. So like stuff with assignments and questions and feedback and all of that stuff. So you know, so like make sure that after the Twitch stream is up that you go into the other room, and it's the same link for the rest of the semester, so you don't have to you can just go back to River and click the hyperlink and log in, and I'll see you there, and we'll discuss everything else. Okay, so today we're going to talk about a few different things. The first thing we're going to do is we're going to do something with Pro Builder, which is an add-on for Unity. So originally it was and has anyone ever used Pro Builder before? And if you haven't used it, have you heard of it? Okay, so most people haven't, it sounds like. So it's an add-on that originally was like created by a separate company, and my understanding is that Unity bought a bunch of companies and integrated into the tool. So they did this also with TextMesh Pro and previously with SpeedTree. So you used to be able to have like basic trees built into Unity. So I referenced that previously. So let's go ahead and do that together. So I'm gonna go ahead and switch so you can see my screen. Let's see if I can do this right. Okay, cool. So I have, and I'm sorry, the chat window is gonna be really far away, so I'll try to see it as good as I can. Alright, so now I'm in Unity. I went ahead and already created a new scene. So in this new scene, I'm gonna set up like a basic sort of platform level. So if you want to like add any of these add-ons in Unity, you have to go to the package manager. So in Unity at the top under Window, I'm gonna go under Package Manager. And then you'll see like a list of a bunch of things. It might take a second to load. And if you scroll down, you'll see Pro Builder. And so if you expand it out, you'll see like a few different versions. So I'm just going to download the version that's associated with my version of Unity. So it has like the version it's verified to work with. So when you select that, you're just going to hit install in the bottom right. And so I went to, again, Window, Packages, I waited for it to load, Pro Builder, and then in the future we're also going to do some stuff with post-processing and maybe something else, we'll see. So it might take a second to load, and then it should be installed. And so once you want to open it up, so I'm going to go to Tools at the top. This is something that did not exist before. And then you should see Pro Builder, which is a new option. And you can go ahead and open up the Pro Builder window. And you'll see something like this. It'll probably pop up, you know, as its own thing like this. I just moved it under there earlier. So you'll see some different options here. So this is mostly for prototyping. You can use it for more intense things than prototyping though. So then it gives you more control over things you're creating in Unity. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to create a new shape. So I'm going to hit the plus right here under new shape. And then it's going to create like a cube in here. And it also, make sure you hit it with a plus because it'll give you this shape tool. And so how many of you have felt limited by the kind of basic primitive shapes in Unity that you can create? So like we've created things like cubes, spheres, capsules, and that's pretty much it, right? Cylinders. Not very exciting. Maybe a plane every once in a while. So Unity is not a 3D modeling program, so it lacks a lot of functionality of a 3D modeling program. So usually people would make 3D assets in a separate program and then they would import them into Unity, and you wouldn't really do much asset creation in Unity. And so Pro Builder allows you to like quickly build stuff out. So now that we've created this new shape, I can go under Shape Selector and you can see like a whole bunch of different options here. So you can see like Bright, Prism, Stair, which is very nice, Door, Arch, all kinds of things. And you can actually modify these settings and it will actually give you different results. So you can make like a little tunnel or something. You can indicate the number of sides, like how complex you want the geometry to be, and stuff like that. And so once you're done and you want to actually have it created in your scene, you have to hit build. So don't forget to hit build, because that will actually make it like a real object in your scene, and then you'll be able to use this. And so one thing does anyone notice anything in here that looks different from like a normal shape? So like if I was to create like, let's see, I'll create a cube here. So like this is just a standard cube. And so can you see anything that's different about these two objects when I select them? Because they are different. And there are a couple different things here. Just looking at these two things. you notice these like lines here? So you have like these blue lines here, and if you look on our cube, our standard cube, it does not have those blue lines. So John said the tunnel is made of several shapes, so you can actually see that it has those blue ones. And then Jay said, is the top one like a bunch of cut up cubes? Sort of like that. So like what you can see is actually the faces in the edges of this object. So like if I was to create, for instance, let's say I created a sphere, all you see is like the outline, and you can see like the lines representing the collider. And when we select this one, yeah, we can see all these blue lines that represent the different edges of it. And if you change this, you can change it to vertex selection, edge selection, and face selection. So what I can do is I can actually select a specific face or edge or whatever, and I can manipulate that in real time. So it gives me like a little bit of functionality that I could get from a 3D modeling program. It's not very advanced, it's very simple, and so it's not really intended for anything really complex. But still, you have like a lot more ability to manipulate stuff. And so like I could, you know, also just move like a vertex if I wanted to. Let's say I just wanted to move this up or something. I could move this in. You know, I'm creating like a very not great shape right now, but you could imagine how it could be useful, right? And so if I want to manipulate it as a whole, I go back and change this to object selection. So very useful, right? So now I'm going to create another shape here. I'm going to create a new shape, and I'm going to create the stairs because I find the stairs very useful. And so again, I'm going to manipulate you can manipulate like the number of steps, the width, the height, and the depth. And so maybe a little bit taller. And also make it curve around, which is cool. More steps. And then don't forget that once you're done, you want to hit build, and it will actually create it as a regular shape. And so what I'm going to do, like I said before, is I'm going to create like a simple kind of platform level, and I'm going to get rid of this other stuff because I don't really want it. So I'm looking at my camera setup. So I have this like kind of spirally staircase, and then I'm going to create some platforms around. And if you have any ideas for what you think I should create, just let me know. So I'll create using a cube. I'm going to make it really big. I'll make it a bit flatter, and I'm going to try to line it up with this top of the staircase. So is anyone else having trouble watching it? I don't know if it's a buffering issue or an internet connection issue. Okay, so it sounds like just some people are having trouble. So if you're having trouble streaming it right now, keep in mind that you'll be able to catch up later on if you miss it. And please just if people are having trouble, it sounds like and I'm sorry, I forgot people's usernames already. Durex Living and Alduin. You know, you can always go back and rewatch it, and hopefully like you can load it. And also I'm gonna probably put it on YouTube as well after. And anyone else who is having trouble, let me know, because you know, like obviously, like if there's like a major problem and it's on my end, it's bad for everyone. So again, I'm just like setting up this kind of platform level. I'm going to duplicate it, Control D or Command D on a Mac. And I'm kind of using my game tab here to get a preview of like where it's at, so I can just get a better feel for it. Maybe I'll make this platform a little bit bigger. Maybe these should be like wide and long. I'm just gonna move my camera a little bit. Okay. I'm gonna make this like really wide. Okay. Yeah, like that wide. So like, I don't want to like push it off screen, so we have like almost like a intersection of like a highway or something. I don't know why. Why not? So I'm just gonna go ahead and create some new materials. So I just want to create this one called Platform 1. And I'll just drag it onto this top platform. What color should it be? I'll create another one for Platform 2. I'm gonna make it glow. I don't know if you've seen this function yet, but let me know what color it should be. Alright, so, okay, blue. Alright, cool. So what you can do is you can actually, blue and yellow. Okay, so we have two colors now, blue and yellow. So you can actually create the main color, and then the emission color is actually like something it fills into the shadows. So like if we had nothing, it would just be blue, right? What it does is it fills in the shadows, so you can actually have like a glowing kind of effect. So if you look in the preview in the bottom right, which you can't really see it because of my thumbnail, but if you do it on your own, you'll be able to see how it fills in the shadows with that secondary color. And so we have sort of a combination of like this yellow and blue. And so I'm gonna go ahead, I just think it looks cool. So, and then for the second platform, I'll reverse it. So I'll make this one yellow, and I'll make this one blue. So you can see it looks a little bit different. And then for the staircase, I don't know. How about red, and then the emission color of, actually I like that. So if you can see here, it's actually like blue, and then it's actually like red, so it's like combining those two colors. You can see sort of a gradient there, which is nice. Cool. Alright, so now I have like a very basic platform set up, and I use my stairs from ProBuilder. And so what we're going to be doing now is we're going to be using something called a NavMesh. So a NavMesh is something that allows a space to be navigable. So have you heard of pathfinding before? So yeah, we're doing pathfinding basically. So there's like an easy way for Unity to calculate distances. So like pathfinding, you have like an area that is navigable. Navigable meaning it's okay to travel through it. So like what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna take this area and I'm gonna create some obstacles in it. So like you can see right now, like the areas you expect to be navigable are basically like any platform, right? So like the top of this one, the bottom of the stairs, you would expect all of those, like if you were a person in this scene, you'll be able to walk around it, right? So I'm gonna create some obstacles. So I'll create like, I don't know, maybe not a capsule. Maybe I'll create like a cylinder, and I will move it around. Try to make it like, not quite sure where it is. There we go. And so based on the scale of the staircase, you can see that that's pretty big, right? So you wouldn't be able to like walk into it. So I'm gonna give this, I'm gonna give it this black material, or maybe this one. This one's, I'll just give it the black material.
My first girlfriend turned into the...
So I just duplicated it, Control D or Command D. I'm creating up some like sort of roadblock kind of things. I'll make a smaller one. So again, I'm just trying to create things that would like block the path of something that was traveling through here. So like you can see it's sort of like a little bit of an obstacle course. So you could imagine like if we had done this the way that we did the movement previously. So remember before we had one game object going after another one that was just going straight in the direction of it. So that was like a very dumb process. Like it was not smart at all. I did not know whether it was like an okay path to go or not. So like it would just basically take the shortest path possible and go in a straight line. So when we have something like AI should be aware of where it can and cannot travel. So it will not try to travel through walls, for instance. So we can try to set up like some walls as well. So I'll create like something like a wall. Give it this black material. And feel free to stop me if you have any questions or something I said doesn't make sense or you can't hear me or whatever. So all I'm doing is just setting up this space, basically. And I'm trying to make sure that I'm aware of the view of the camera to make sure I'm not obscuring the view too much. So that you can still see everything that's going on from this fixed camera position. So what do you think? Does this look all right? Is this like an okay kind of platform area? Should I add some more stuff? What do you think? Okay, cool. All right, so now we have all this area. What we're gonna do is we have to actually create the NavMesh. So NavMesh stands for navigation mesh. So what we're going to do is we're going to select everything in this whole area that we want to be part of this thing to understand whether it should be navigable or not. So like if I select all of the things in here, and I can also just select them this way. If I just click the first one, hold down Shift and click the last one, and then it will select everything. And now in my inspector on the right, you'll see this little drop down arrow next to static. So you're going to drop that down and you're going to select navigation static. Static meaning it's not going to change. This is a fixed area. And so you won't see anything that's changed. So we have to first generate an actual nav mesh. So to get there, you're going to go to Window at the top, and then you're going to go under AI and Navigation. It will open up a new window. And so you'll have like a few different options in here. So we're going to go under Bake. So what this is going to do is it's going to take a look at the geometry of the level and figure out what areas could be considered navigable. And so if you can leave all the settings in their default state for right now, and then you can hit, it's going to tell you have to save the scene. So I'm going to go ahead and save this as week 9, and I already made 2 week 9s. I already made a week 9. Oh, which week are we in? Are we in 9? We're in 9, right? I'm gonna save over this scene. which is something I created like beforehand just to practice. Okay. So now that I've saved my scene, I can then bake the NavMesh. It might take a minute. You'll see in the bottom right hand corner, it's generating it. And now when you look, you can see all of this blue area that's been created. So this blue area represents navigable space. So if you can imagine that like this is you walking around, notice you can't go off the edge, like that's not considered navigable. So like you wouldn't want like a computer controlled player to try to go through that. Also, you wouldn't want a computer controlled player to try to go through one of these huge cylinders, right? However, if you were to somehow get on top of it, that area will be fine. And so now we can see, and you can see like some trouble areas potentially, like if you look at the staircase, notice how like the navigable area isn't totally there, like there's some geometry here to contend with. And so what you can try to do is you can try to change some of the settings on here. So like, for instance, like max slope is one of them, and you can see the preview as far as like what is like okay travel, and then like step height, like how high are we imagining this thing can travel. Like if it has like 12-foot long legs, then it's going to be easy to go up like huge things. So like, and you can try these different things just to see what the outcome is like. Does that like look good or bad or whatever? And usually like for the most part it's like going to be the default stuff is fine. This is a huge step. I don't know if that's, I feel like it's probably too much. So, and feel free to like talk amongst yourselves or like whatever. You know, I want to just make sure that people are able to interact and like, you know, it feels like a real thing that's happening and not just like some internet thing that's like in another window somewhere. So does it make sense like what's going on with the path here, the one we've created, how like all the space that is like this blue kind of thing is area that something could actually go through. You could imagine how it could go through it. So like you see over here how like these cylinders, you can go over it, and that has to do with like this max slope and potentially the step size as well. So if you change it, then it changes like what would be considered acceptable as far as like whether that would be considered navigable or not. And so as I change those settings and then I rebake it, it makes it more or less accessible. So now we have this basic NavMesh. So if we want something to actually use it, we have to create something called a NavMesh agent. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and create a NavMesh agent. So a NavMesh agent is basically any game object that you attach a NavMesh agent scripts to. So I'm going to go under create and I'm going to create a new capsule. So I'm just creating this capsule to represent like a player or something. And so don't forget like which direction is forward. So when we select an object, you know, it gives you like the little arrows pointing in the different directions so you can tell which way is forward for a game object. So when we click the capsule, the blue arrow is forward, right? So I'm going to go ahead and just like add some stuff to this little capsule to give it some character so we know which way it's going. So maybe I will create like, I don't know, what should I create for this capsule to like, so we can understand which way it's facing, because it, you know, if you just look at it, you don't know which way it's facing. So like, I don't know, should I give it like a hat or like some arms or like a nose or what? How should we give this some character? Face? Any other ideas? I can start adding some facial stuff, and if anyone else wants me to create something else, I can do that. Maybe I'll make it using this blood or like blood colored material. So I'll give it the, so okay, face and a hat. Maybe I'll create like a little sphere that's like a part of it. Like, say it has a hat. And then I'll create like a... Actually, I could probably create another capsule. Rotate it this way, and then like flatten it. Yeah, that looks pretty good, right? Like a face. You love it? Is it beautiful? God, it looks hideous. It's like what's that character? Netsuko? Maybe I'll create some this. I don't know. Like gives it some attitude, maybe? And if you're ever like not sure what the hell is going on, just let me know. Character looks kind of scared, I think. Yeah, it's scared of the coronavirus, probably. Almost certainly. Okay, cool. Alright, so now we know which way the character is facing. I don't know about angry. I mean, it's kind of like it kind of reminds me of the Kool-Aid guy. So we're gonna create some angry ones later. Does this even look like a nose? I don't even know if this looks like a nose. There we go. I think that's pretty good. Don't forget to save your scene always. Cool. Alright, so now I just created all these shapes. I need to make sure that they are children of the capsule because I want them to move with the capsule. Then I can like, you know, move everything. Cool, that looks good. Maybe a little bit flatter. Okay, so now selecting my capsule, I'm gonna give it a name. Well, I'm gonna call it player. And then I'm also going to change the tag to player because I want this to represent the player of the game because it's going to be responsive to the player. So again, if I want to set a tag in the inspector, I select the game object in the hierarchy. In the inspector, I go under tag and I set it, so I set it to player. So now I'm going to go ahead and, well, I'll move it a little bit down. Maybe I'll make it a little bit bigger. I don't know, I kind of want to give it feet too. I'm like, see, I've made this, taking this too seriously now. I'm Kool-Aid for a name, sure. Not so Kool-Aid. Not so cool. Not so Kool-Aid, man. Does this look like feet? I don't even know. I think I could see it, right? Maybe. Yeah, so not so Kool-Aid man is like scared to go out into the world. Not so Kool-Aid man has to go work at the grocery store and he doesn't have a mask. So sad. Okay. Cool, so now if I select my Not So Kool-Aid Man and then I go under Add Component, Mr. Potato, yeah, Mr. Potato Head, yeah, I can see that. We're gonna go to Add Component and then we're gonna go under Navigation NavMesh agent. So agent has to do with agency, so something that's able to like move on its own. Yeah, I mean, you know, cool. Mr. Not So Kool-Aid Man is like, you know, Mr. Kool-Aid Man's like half son or something, and he doesn't know his mother. I don't know. It's a really strange setup. So again, I selected my Not So Kool-Aid Man. I went to add component, navigation, NavMesh agent. And so I'm just gonna leave all the settings in their default place right now. And so the idea behind the NavMesh agent is that it allows something to traverse the NavMesh. So if I give something a NavMesh agent, it means that it should be able to navigate around the area that we've seen. So when we went to the navigation tab and we looked at the area, so all this blue area should be navigable by the Not So Kool-Aid Man. So of course I have to create a script to do so. So I'm gonna go to my scripts folder here. I'm gonna go to create C# script, and I will call this cool nav with a K, because obviously that's how you spell cool. And so it will go ahead and open up my editor. And by the way, someone asked if I think it was Tyler said that his Visual Studio had expired, and so I think it's like the community version or the basic version is free. You just have to like register it for Visual Studio if you want to keep using it after 30 or 60 days or whatever. However, I use Sublime Text for things. You may have noticed that. So I just like it more, and you can actually, there are instructions for how to set this up online. I can post them if people are interested. Because I don't like Visual Studio. I find that it's like very heavy. It takes a long time to load, and it's just like slow. So I usually just don't want to even mess with it. So now I have my new script open, and I'm gonna go ahead and what I want to do is I want to be able to click somewhere, and I want my Mr. Not So Kool-Aid Man to be able to go to that location using the NavMesh. So the first thing I have to do is I have to add a directive to the top. And so those are these things at the top, like using whatever. So I have to specifically add using Unity engine, make sure you type it correctly, .ai, so that we can access all of the navigation mesh class stuff, classes. And so my headphones are like half falling off. Okay. And so I'm gonna actually attach this to the Not So Kool-Aid Man, which is a really long thing to say. I'm just gonna call him Cool. That's just gonna be how it is. So I'm gonna go ahead and create. Oh, can you? Sure. Is this big enough? Is everything clear? So I'm gonna create a new NavMesh agent in my script, and so NavMesh agent is the class that we just added that component to cool. And so I'm gonna call this NavMesh agent cool. And so in start, I want to assign it to be using get component. So I want to assign it to be whichever NavMesh agent is attached to the same game object. So to do so, I'm going to say cool equals get component less than, and then the name of the component, which is NavMesh agent, open and close parentheses, semicolon. So this will allow it to assign that based on whatever is attached to it. And so again, I said that the goal for this is to click somewhere and have cool navigate to that place. So what does it sound like we need to use if we want it to be something where you click on it and then it knows where that position is in space? What would it be used that allows us to tap into that? we could click somewhere in space, it would know where that position is. So ray casting, right? So we're also going to do it based on the mouse press, but first we're just going to have it go based on ray casting. So I'm going to go back to my script here. Okay, no worries, Mark. And what we want to do is when we want to set up a new ray, I'm going to say ray, and then I'm going to give it a name. So usually I just say like laser, because that's just what I do. And then I'll say equals. And now if I want to base this on screen point to ray, so based on like the camera looking through where the cursor is. So remember how we had like the cursor going into the scene and like hitting a point in our scene. So we want to do the same thing we did before. So I can access the main camera by saying camera.main, and then I can use the method called, does anyone remember? It will allow us to take a point from the screen and then turn it into an array. So it's called screen point to ray. And so what that does is we give it a mouse position, or a position on the screen. So I'm going to use input dot mouse position, and so it will take that position, cast it in, or it won't cast it yet. It'll set it up so that it goes into the scene. And so then we also want to have a raycast hit. So I say raycast hit, the class name, and then I can call it hit. And actually I think I saw somewhere that I don't actually need to initialize it. So apparently, we could try this right now. It'll just work if I just create it without doing anything. So let's see if that actually works. So now when we want to actually cast our array, we're going to use an if statement, right? So remember how we did it before. So I'm going to say if, and using physics, the physics class, and then the raycast method in there, and the first parameter would be the name of our array, which is laser, and then the second thing would be out, and then the name of the raycast hit that we're using. So in this case, I just called it hit. And the third thing is like we could include optional parameters if we wanted to. I'm just going to keep it simple right now. So we're going to use our laser as the ray, and then we're going to use hit to store the information about what we hit. And the second thing is that we wanted to make it responsive when you click something, right? So we have to also check the second condition. So this first condition will return true whenever we actually hit something in our scene. But we not only want to tell if it's hitting something, if the cursor is hitting something in our screen, but we want to tell if the cursor is hitting something in our screen and the player presses a mouse button. So the second condition is based on the input class, and we're going to use get mouse button down. I think that's right. Mouse button. If we want to do it based on clicking. And then if you remember, left mouse is 0. So we're going to actually cast this ray called laser, store the information in hit. If it actually hits something, this will return true. And so like not only does it need to hit something, but you also have to be clicking the mouse. And so inside of here, the thing we want to do whenever we actually hit something is we want to set the destination for the NavMesh agent. So a destination is a place that it knows that it needs to go to. And so you could you could imagine how that could be useful. You have, you want a player to go to a certain position based on a click, so the click of the mouse. You could have like a point and click game where someone has to go and navigate to something. So different kinds of interactions depending on what kind of game you're creating. So I'm going to access my NavMesh agent, which is called cool. dot set destination. So this is one way to do it. So in parentheses, I can give it a position. So the position of the destination. So it's for everyone. So for set destination, let's say that we want to make it the position of the hit. So you know how we can access that information, hit information? So if we didn't know, we would do what? What would we do? Say we don't know how raycast hits work. It's alright, it's alright. You'll be able to go back later. So what we did is we just we set up this new script. We created a NavMesh agent. We made sure we're adding the Unity engine.ai directive at the top. We assign our NavMesh agent to the same game object that the script will eventually be attached to. And then, so we're just doing what we did before with creating a raycast based on a cursor position. And so now we're going to actually set the destination for our NavMesh agent. And so if I want to access the position of our raycast hit, you know, you can always just like, if you're using Visual Studio, you can do the predictive autocomplete stuff and it will pop open like a little box showing you everything. Or you can just go on the scripting API and you can find out all the different variables, properties, methods, stuff of a given class. So I know that I can use raycast hit.point, which will be the point at which your ray hit something in your scene. So if we did this right, then we'll have our cursor, we'll cast a ray from the cursor into the scene. And if the mouse is pressed, then it will set the destination for cool. So it will go to the actual point that we hit. So I'm going to save this, Control S or Command S. And so now I have to make sure that I attach the script to our friend cool. And so luckily I don't have any errors, it looks like. Let's see if it actually works. So I should just be able to click somewhere, and there he goes. It's like magic, right? I mean, he's pretty slow, but that's all right. So you could actually, and you can actually change the NavMesh agent settings here, so we can make him like super fast if we want to. Maybe it should go over here. Maybe it should be like really fast. I don't know. And so this way, he shouldn't actually try to go through any of the game objects in here. And so like he should be able to navigate around like obstacles and things, and also like not walk over things. One thing is that it always wants to go forward. So you have to make sure that like sometimes it might get, a NavMesh agent might get caught or something if it can't turn around in time. And so they have the angular speed option here as well. So does that make sense? Are people able to follow that? Okay, cool. And so what I'm going to do now is, you could imagine how Ariel saying hi again. You could imagine how this could be used with enemies. So like, can you think of ways that this might be used with an enemy? How could you imagine this being used? Can you imagine it being used somehow? You could imagine a patrol, for instance. So you could imagine going from one point to another, and you can actually set up a queue of destinations. So you could have one destination and then the next destination. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna actually create a like a proximity sensor kind of thing. So you can imagine how an enemy, like if someone enters the area that the enemy's in, the enemy is alerted to the presence of like a player or something, and then could go after that player. So I'm gonna create a new script in here, a new C# script. I'm gonna call it enemy alert, and I'm gonna open it up. So, and we're gonna use something that we haven't, I don't think we've used it in class, which is triggers. Have we used those in class? I'm not sure if we have. So what I'm gonna do with my not so Kool-Aid man, no we haven't, okay, cool. So I'm gonna go ahead and duplicate my not so Kool-Aid man. And one thing that we can also do is I can actually, and I don't know if I've showed you this, you can actually drag a game object from your hierarchy into your project view to create a prefab. And that prefab actually will allow you to create additional ones. So you could basically use it, create a new one here. So I now have like a duplicate kind of not so Kool-Aid man. And so I will create like a different, oops, I did not mean to do that. I'm gonna go ahead and I'm gonna duplicate this blood covered, and I'm gonna set this to like a different, no, slightly different color situation here. It can be in opposition. That kind of. So this one's gonna be an enemy. So naturally, if it's going to be an enemy, it should be angry, because all enemies are angry, right? I'm trying to make turning the eyebrows around a little bit. I don't know, what do you think? Be like the hat should be like backwards or something. I don't know. Does that look very enemy-like? Cool. Alright, so now, and I'm gonna rename this, I'll call it Purple Cool. So we have Purple Cool here, who's going to serve as an enemy. So I'll move Purple Cool like over here somewhere. And one thing is that we also I want to add rigid bodies to these so that they can use the physics system. So I just added a rigid body for the Purple Cool, and I'm going to add one for the regular Cool, player Cool. Okay, so now I have my script that I created that's going to be based on, there are different ways that we could do this if we wanted to tell if a player was within a certain distance. One way to do that would be to have, where it's like fixed, it knows who the player is, and it just reads the distance. So you can calculate the distance between 2 points in space, so you can calculate the distance between, for instance, the enemy's position and Cool's position. Ool? You think Ool? I mean, Ool is kind of hard to say. Ool. Ool. I don't know. I mean, we could. Here, how about this? You call him Ool, and I'll call him Purple. I don't know. So hard to type with a cat here. Alright, so one thing is that if you've ever seen on a collider, there's an option on every collider, which is trigger, which is a Boolean Boolean property. So what that means is that, so colliders prevent you from going through something, and unless it's a trigger. So like, you know, when we imagined a collider, we imagined something that prevents something from going through walls or whatever, but with the trigger, it's different. So it's basically just occupying space to be able to know if something is present or not. So what I can do is you can actually add, so on Mr. Kool-Aid Man, I'm gonna go ahead and create a new collider. So I'm going to create a sphere collider, and you can see that it creates like this, you know, the green sphere indicating the collider's perimeter or whatever. And so if you go down here, you can then go to, so if I was to just, and I can make this bigger so you can change the radius, and it will make it bigger in space. So if I was to just like run this like this, it might cause some conflicts. So it creates some really weird behavior, because don't forget that a collider can't go through another collider by default. And so that's why you have this conflict where this thing is trying to use the NavMesh, but also trying to like prevent it from going through stuff. So when we set it to be a trigger and then we try it, it actually doesn't actually like push against anything. So it doesn't actually like, it occupies space, but you can't actually tell if it's hitting something, which is intentional. So you want to be able to tell if someone, like for instance, you know that a certain point in a map is supposed to trigger like the music to begin, like, you know, start playing this new track of music because you're approaching the boss. Or for instance, like, you know, once a person goes through a certain door, then the enemy approaches or whatever. And so those are how triggers are used. So what we're gonna do is I'm gonna make this a little bit bigger. And so we want to be able to tell if this trigger, if the enemy occupies the trigger. So if purple enters that space, we want to be able to make sure that purple can go after cool. So going back to our script, does that make sense, by the way? And don't forget the first thing that we have to do, if we're going to be using the NavMesh agent or NavMesh stuff in our script, is to add the directive at the top. So using unityengine.ai, and so that will allow us to access all of those functions. And so now when we go, we're going to create a new NavMesh agent, much like we did before, and I will call this one enemy. And then inside of start, I want to assign it to be, because I'm going to attach this to the same game object as the enemy, so I want to use get component. So enemy equals get component less than, and then NavMesh agent greater than, open and close parentheses. And there we go. Okay. So we have that assigned, and now we want to be able to tell if so normally we would be able to tell if something hit something else or collided with something else using onCollisionEnter or onCollisionStay or onCollisionExit, which we've used before. If we want to be able to tell if something is hitting a trigger, then there's a separate set of functions that we can use. So I'm going to go ahead and create it below the update here. So the one we're going to use is called onTriggerStay. And so what onTriggerStay does is it runs whenever something occupies a trigger. And so if we were to do onCollisionEnter, we would create a collision here. However, since it doesn't like hit things, it doesn't actually have a collision associated with it. It has a collider though. So we're going to create a collider here. So I'm going to call this one trigger report. So remember that when we use before we used like we called it a collision report, which had all the information about the collision, like where did it happen, who was involved, all of those things. And so we're going to create this collider called trigger report that's going to give us all the information about what was triggered. Okay, so the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to do a debug.log so that I know. So debug.log, and inside the parentheses I can give myself a message. So I'm going to say hit a trigger, and so whenever this actually hits, and I'm going to save it, Control S or Command S on a Mac, so we can kind of test this to see if this will work. I have to make sure that I don't forget. I need to add the script to Purple Cool. So I called it enemy alert, and so I'm going to make sure that I also disable cool nav, because I don't want it to, because when I duplicated it, it still had that script attached to it. I made sure that I disabled that. I added my enemy alert. So now in my console here at the bottom, I should be able to, I already forgot, so here, let's move. And so if it's like doing something weird, sometimes you can like, it might be because of gravity. So it depends on the shapes that you have. And so like now I can see that when they're really close by, you can see that hit a trigger is happening. And so like if I go outside of that space, let's say I have cool go over there. So I don't think he wants to behave right now, but you can see how this is triggering, right? You can see that there's like 14,000, 15,000 messages happening right now. And so what we need to do is we need to actually take what we did before. So remember before we used raycast to be able to tell if we hit a certain position while we're clicking the mouse. If so, then we moved, we set the destination for our NavMesh agent to be there. And so what I'm going to do now is I'm going to go back to my script, and we're going to do the same thing where, so we can try to assign it to be the trigger. However, we might also want to be able to check if the thing that we hit is like a specific trigger, because as our levels get more complicated, we could have like, we could have like 100 triggers in a level. So we want to be able to make sure that it's a specific one. So if we want to check that, we can check it in several different ways. We already made sure to give Ariel wants out of the room. Let me let her out. All right, sorry about that. So we want to be able to check if it's a specific thing. So we gave Mr. Cool or Not So Cool a tag, right? So the tag that we used was player. So we can actually check if the trigger or the collider that we hit has a tag called player. So I can use an if statement here. So if trigger report dot compare tag. So compare tag will give us the, in parentheses, you give a string, and you want to check if the thing that you hit has a specific tag. So in this case, we're checking if the collider that we hit has the tag player. If it does, then do whatever is after that. So if you recall in our other script, which I've already lost, where is it? We use this method called setDestination. So setDestination, and then it took a vector3, so a point in space. And so we want to be able to we're checking if it's player. If it is player, we want to basically like go after that. So I'm going to use enemy.set destination, and then in parentheses I want to access the position of the collider that we hit. So I can go to first the trigger report, and then I can actually access the transform of that, because transform has the position within it. And then from the transform, I can access the position, which is a vector 3. So again, I was checking if the collider, which in this case we just called it trigger report, so it would have all the information about the collider's trigger. We checked if it had the tag player. If so, then we set the destination of our NavMesh agent to be based on the trigger report.transform.position, so the position of the transform of the collider that we hit. Does that make sense? I hope it makes sense. Let me know if it doesn't make sense. So I'm going to go ahead and save this, and I've already attached it. So sometimes you have like some weird kind of interactions between the rigid body and the NavMesh agent. So, however, you do need a rigid body attached to one of the things. So I have it on there, and so now you can see that purple is actually going after. They're very slow, so it's kind of like, so you can see how we actually have like an enemy is going after, and if I was to actually escape the distance of that, and I can see, I turned all these things off before when I was in what's it called, when I was in play mode, so it didn't save. So as long as it's within the space of that, so like if I was to take my, cool and move him like over here, so now suddenly purple has lost the position because he's no longer in that trigger. So the trigger being that green sphere that you can see, and as soon as it crosses that line, you can see the purple starts to go after him. So we're able to follow that. We're able to see how that worked. So the enemy is chasing, and gosh, that hat, like crooked. So Lieutenant Dangle said, when we do this assignment, will we have to have our player get reset when hit by a hazard? I mean, I'm basically gonna leave that up to you. So you'll be able to just, and I'll give you some rules. So like, in the second part of class, I'll give a description of the assignment, and we'll talk about it together. But any questions so far about what we've done to be able to get this NavMesh going, get the NavMesh agent, one for the player where we can click to navigate around, and one for an enemy that uses the trigger to be able to tell if the player has entered its space. Any questions? Okay, so it's okay to have many questions, but other people might have the same question, and maybe it's something that wasn't addressed in the stream, so that's why it's important, like if you have a question that you feel like might be relevant, or other people might be thinking as well, that it's an opportunity to clarify that. So, you know, this is the kind of thing where you could watch this stream later, and it would be the same as now, but now you have the opportunity to ask questions that could explain something, or I could put something into different words that maybe make more sense to you. That I might not be able to later. Or, you know, someone else might have the same problem. So what we can do is, we have this like, you know, this basic setup, and we can actually sort of take what we've done before. So we worked on animation and animator controllers last week. And so we can actually sort of combine these two things that we did together. So I've already gone ahead and made a prefab of the character that we had last week. So I'm gonna go ahead and just drop this character in here. So I made a prefab, so I dragged the character out, and now I put the character back in. And so I'm actually gonna turn off this script, and I'm gonna go ahead and I've already done it here, which was I created a script and I'm just gonna open it. So in this script, it's actually a combination of what we did together. So if you recall, we had where we set a destination based on a mouse click. And now all I've done is I've taken my animation. So I created an animator here called myAnim. I assigned it inside of the start function. And then I used, there is a velocity parameter for NavMesh agent. So I could actually access the velocity based on the NavMesh agent. So, and I called the NavMesh agent. So I was trying to tell if the velocity was equal to vector 3.0, meaning it's not moving, so it's zero velocity. Then I set the move state integer, I set it to a value of 0. So if you recall from that lesson, move state of 0 is associated with idle state. And then if it's not a speed of 0, then I set that to be 1. So that when this thing actually moves to something, it will actually play the walk animation. And when it's standing still, it will play the idle animation. Hope that makes sense. Let me know if it doesn't. So I'm gonna drag my script onto this Akai prefab, and then I'm also going to add the NavMesh agent, and you can actually see that it creates like this collider around it. It represents the space that it occupies. And so hopefully we should be able to see this. So when I click somewhere, and it's actually operating for both of these characters, which is a little bit hard because like they're both trying to go to the same destination. So like if I just move spool out of here, then you can actually see that I will stop moving. So as soon as it like approaches the destination, the character stops, and you can actually see that there's and it actually looks not too bad. You know, like you can actually see the character moving, walking down the stairs, so you can combine these things into something that is suddenly looking a lot more professional. Of course, we have them both clustering together, so it doesn't work, you know, perfectly. And I'm gonna save my scene. So, and I think that's all we're gonna cover today. I don't know. What do you all think? Were you able to get all that? Were you able to understand it? So if you have specific questions, let me know now. And you know, if there are questions that, you know, if something didn't make sense or whatever, it is helpful to go over those again. Okay, cool. Yeah, so it is nice to be able to have everything available later. So now I'm actually like one last little thing I'm gonna do is I'm gonna go ahead and because I can't remember if we've done this in this class. Have we changed the skybox at all? I can't remember. Okay, cool. So if you could imagine that if you haven't heard of a skybox, if you look around your default scene, you see this sky area here? Just imagine that the entire world lives inside of a cube. And this cube, like you're actually seeing the walls of the cube. So if you've ever seen, this is a really old reference at this point, but there was a movie called The Truman Show. And in The Truman Show, it's like this guy's life was like a reality show. He didn't know, but his world was made up. He was surrounded by actors and everything. So he like lived his life not knowing that all of his friends and like family were like fake actors, and he lived on a set. And so like he lived on an island, and like he actually oh, I guess spoiler alert if you haven't seen it. He sailed to the end of space on the set, so he actually hit a wall. So what he thought was the sky, like the horizon line, was actually just painted wall. And so in this space, you could imagine that this is actually like a fake edge of the world. So this is what we call the skybox. So, and it has like a sun here, and the horizon, you can see like the atmosphere. And so I'm gonna go ahead and, so one thing that you should always do in any game you make in Unity, like probably the first thing you should do is change the skybox, because when you look at people's games and they have this default skybox, it's very noticeable. You know exactly what it is, and it looks very amateurish, so you want to make sure that you avoid that if at all possible, which it is always possible. So what I'm going to do is, it's actually a kind of material, so if you right click, create, you can actually create a material, and I'll call this one dark sky, I guess. And under shader in the inspector, there's the option for skybox. And so there are different kinds. QMap is like a specific format. You can actually create one with 6 sides. It refers to like a cube. So a cube has 6 sides on it. You know, there's like left, right, front, back, top, bottom. Those are the 6 sides. So you can actually like have textures that you assign for each one. We're going to use the procedural. So procedural meaning it's going to be able to generate it just based on how we set these parameters. And so like you have some options here. Like you can set the atmosphere thickness and sun sky convergence and sun size. So like right now we're not using this yet, but you can see the preview in here. So I can see how big the sun is, for instance. You can set the sky tint and the ground. So maybe I want this to be like purple. Maybe the ground should be black. I don't know. What do you think? Does this look weird? Maybe like sunrise? I don't know. I think that looks nice. So, and you can see the preview again in the icon as well. So let's say we want to actually use this skybox. Okay, I'm glad you like it. If we want to set it, we have to actually go to the lighting settings. So we can go to Window and Rendering, Lighting Settings. So this will give us the lighting settings for our scene. I'm just going to move this over here. So you can see that the first option in the lighting settings is actually the skybox material. So if you hit the circle with the dot, it'll list all the materials, and we can find the one that we created together, which is dark sky. Maybe it's too dark because now like all of these like, and I can change this. So maybe I'll change that black material to be, so it like stands out a little bit more. I don't know. Maybe I can also give this one an emission. So it stands out, you know? I'm gonna make it look nice and stand out. Okay. But now if I look at this, and in my camera you can't really see it in the game view, but it looks a lot more interesting and a lot less basic. So I'm going to recommend that everyone, if you're using anything that you can actually see the skybox, please make sure that it is not the default one, because you don't want to look like an amateur. Cool. So that's it for today's lesson. So I'm going to go ahead and save my scene. And so this is the last chance for any questions on the stream. So if you have any questions, or you want me to go back over something, or something was unclear, and if you have no questions, let me know too. So, looking at this again, you know, I created a new collider on here. I added that collider, and I made sure to set it to a trigger. Made it bigger, so like, you know, anything that has a rigid body that enters that spherical space will be like triggered. Cool. So just gonna take a look at this again. Okay, well, I mean, if no one else has any questions, then we'll take like a short break, and then we will resume in the Blackboard Collaborate Ultra room for today, anyways, for those people that are watching today. So let's say that we'll begin that at 7:10. So I will be there at 7:10, so I'll give you the assignment. We'll talk about previous stuff, and so yeah, so thanks for watching the stream. I'll see you all in a few minutes.